Hi viewers, today video by #DailyVias to this very moment, and he will continue to do that, and it's in my recollection the first leader of this country who went out of his way to in fact polarize the country, to divide us. That's what he wanted to do. #DailyVias. And so the only way this gets knitted back together is for people of courage like Liz Cheney to stand up and say the emperor wears no clothes. Well, Mitch McConnell sees the world the way Liz Cheney does. Why not give her some backing? Why not throw her a bone and say, yeah, I think anyone with information about the coup plot should #DailyVias go talk to the committee, Kevin McCarthy or Jim Jordan or the coup plotters themselves. I mean, why not be part of the effort to get rid of Donald Trump at the polls by showing him for who he really is? Listen, I really am a little uncomfortable of having the position to try and explain these guys, but I really think this, it's like going undercover, right? Like if you've seen them in the in the bathroom, like you can tell us, like just like us, they just support drugs. I feel like a criminal defense lawyer that got the short straw here, but I mean, here's what I will tell you. Imagine for a moment that you're trying #DailyVias to run for office in a difficult state, and the majority of your party thinks this guy is the best thing since sliced bread. The majority of Mitch McConnell's party thinks Trump won the election. They think he was just fine as a president. They'd like to see him as president again, so he is trying, not very successfully, to do the splits and try to quietly behind the scenes push a sense of normal standards for a Republican Party that believes in free and fair elections versus not losing his credibility with his caucusar an ability to ever get re-elected in a party that is worshipping a big liar. The strategic error in all that is the belief that they can't change you. Voters can be leaders led, and the fact that Liz Cheney hasn't turned into a Democrat on anything. She just has an old-fashioned Republican view on the Constitution. That's it. And the fact that there's only one chair, Justin Les Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. #DailyVias. That's it. Yeah, we'll see about the error. I wonder about how McConnell thinks about whether how he's balancing. He said he's very eager to see what the House committee does. He also, I think, worries that the more you elevate the 1 to 6 committee's findings, that it could make the situation harder for Senate Republicans who are running for re-election. And as Claire said, always keep your eye on that ball, which is all he cares about is being majority leader again. He'll do anything. He'd happily kill one of his family members to become majority, but I'm kidding, I'm not serious. I don't think anybody wants to jump on me. I don't think Mitch McConnell's a murderer, but I do think he will go to great lengths to make sure he's majority leader. Best day in his life though the other night when Trump endorsed Dr. Oz, because you saw McConnell say, I guess we're gonna see how good how powerful Donald Trump is in a few weeks. 5 weeks from now Dr. Oz loses. That's a huge win for McConnell because he gets the candidate he wants, the Pennsylvania center right. He's got it, and he takes a big chunk out of Donald Trump. We'll be watching. We'll cover that story later in the program. And now Dan Gomez got squeezed out. Another break. Dan Goldman weighs in on the other side. This is today's hypocrisy alert. Donald Trump and his allies, as you all know, continue to use the big lie about voter fraud to pursue with bigger measures to #DailyVias limit access to the right to vote all across the country. So with that in mind, there's some extraordinary news today out of a legitimate investigation of voter fraud in North Carolina. Voter fraud potentially carried out by Mark Meadows, Donald Trump's longtime ally and ex-White House chief of staff, after reports that Meadows was registered to vote in North Carolina using an address there that he actually never lived at. NBC News has learned the state's Board of Elections removed him from its voter rolls this week, citing documentation that indicated Meadows lived in Virginia and last voted in the 2021 election there, which would obviously make his registration in North Carolina against state law. We're back with Claire, Dan and John. So entire election, it always seems to happen in North Carolina, but here we are again, and we do need to, I think, clarify that. #DailyVias. It seems that the reason he was removed from the voter rolls was because he voted in Virginia in 2021, not 2020, and under state law, once you are living out of state and you vote out of state, you're off the voter rolls. But it is interesting that they're focused on it. We're only in 2022 now. The election in 2021 was not that long ago, and so clearly they are looking into whether Mark Meadows committed voter fraud by voting in North Carolina from an address where he did not live. And you said it, the hypocrisy is remarkable. This is one of the biggest champions for the big lie, the bogus voter fraud allegations that were never proven, and in fact we are still promised. Donald Trump is still out there promising evidence about this a year and a half later. Where is this evidence? When is it going to materialize out of thin air. But Mark Meadows in his book was adamant about it, and in a place you've never stepped foot his hashtag DailyVice wife signed him up for a double white trailer. He was chief of staff in the present United States. Prosecute him. Well, there you go. Jail clash. Claire's position is clear, no ambiguity about Claire's position. We needed you at the table today, Claire. Thank you all so much for spending some time with us. When we come back, former Zelensky advisor, our friend Igor Novikov, joins us live from Ukraine. That's after a quick break. Don't go anywhere. One thing that really stuck out is when I asked her about how she felt about the Russian atrocities in Bucha and the Russians approaching cremators. She basically replied, puts a rifle to my head and says, hell Ukraine, I'll hail Ukraine. Someone puts right through my head and says, hell Russia, I'll hail Russia. And she ended it by saying, I just wanted to survive. Don't you understand? Hi again everyone, it's 5 o'clock in New York. It's a simple, powerful and painful thing to hear out loud, right? Ukrainian woman in her 50s who just wants to survive. It's a senseless war being waged upon them by the Russians, process in hideous ways. The UN Secretary General saying today a global ceasefire at the moment doesn't seem possible, and that the current aim should be managing safe evacuations. UNICEF just announced that 1.4 million people in eastern Ukraine are without running water. Meanwhile, in areas where Russians have retreated, unimaginable horrors are being revealed in their wake. Reporting from the New York Times, Ukrainian prosecutors were joined this week by a team of French experts as they exhumed bodies from mass graves in Bucha, a Kiev suburb where hundreds of civilians were killed during the brief Russian occupation of that area on Tuesday. They said they had exhumed 49 bodies from one communal grave, many of which cemetery workers had collected from homes and streets during the occupation, often at great risk. Earlier today, the International Criminal Court tweeted out a statement from one of their prosecutors who visited Bucha. It reads, quote, Ukraine is a crime scene. We're here because we have reasonable grounds to believe that crimes within the jurisdiction of the ICC are being committed. We have to pierce the fog of war to get to the truth. Justice matters. Pierce the fog of war. Show the innocent civilians being killed and locations flattened, decimated by the Russian war. Places like places that our colleague Gabe Gutierrez saw in the town of Makarov, about 45 miles outside of Kyiv. Watch, this is what's left of a kindergarten. It's actually the second kindergarten we've visited in the past 2 days that is obliterated. You can see here the playground where more than 100 students would attend classes each and every day. But here in Makari, again 45 miles west of Kiev, we've seen Ukrainian forces recovering ammunition that the Russians left behind after their retreat. The death toll continuing to rise in this area, already several hundred, with atrocities mounting. President Joe Biden took a big step yesterday, finally using the word genocide to describe Putin's war. Here he is doubling down on using the word genocide. Yes, I call it genocide because it's become clear that Putin is just trying to wipe out the idea of even being able to feed Ukrainians, and the amount the evidence is mounting. It's different than it was last week. The more evidence is coming out of literally the horrible things that the Russians have done in Ukraine, and we're going to only learn more and more about the devastation, and we'll let the lawyers decide internationally whether or not it qualifies, but it sure seems that way to me. That's where we begin the our friend Igor Novikov is back with us. He's a former advisor to Ukrainian President Zelensky who remains in the country with his family. Igor, you called it a genocide, I think, in the earliest days. That was Putin's intention. Your president described it that way as well. What is the impact in your view and the significance of an American president describing the war in Ukraine as a genocide? Well, I absolutely applaud what President Biden said today, and I said it about President Zelensky that he's a human being, and it's important to be a human being and use the right terminology, not because some formulas or methodologies say otherwise, but because you're a human being. You're seeing it with your own eyes. You understand what's going on. Ukrainian people are being killed indiscriminately for one and only reason they are Ukrainians, so that is genocide. And I'm glad to say that you have a human being for presidents as well. The question that I put to diplomatic experts and military experts is, does this change the equation in terms of what we give an ally fighting a genocide as opposed to an ally fighting a war? The answer is, and they're all ex-advisors, so it's not coming from inside the government yet. The answer is yes. And then news today of a big and new, and it seems more advanced package for the country. Tell me, is it your view that you're getting the weapons you need? I know it's never fast enough, but is the sort of delta between what you're asking for and what you're getting shrinking? Well, it's definitely shrinking, and I spoke with the president's office today and asked them whether they had any messages for me to relay, and they said it's all about the speed Of those deliveries, I think the message weapons has been heard, and that's just a question of how quickly we can get those weapons into Ukraine, because you know what's coming next is what some people in Ukraine call potentially a battle for Donbass, and Putin is trying to outnumber Ukrainian forces 5-1 in certain areas, so you know we've won a battle you know, but we were still some days and weeks away from winning a war, and you know the speed of those deliveries is of vital importance to Ukraine. Your president's on TV today delivering a message in English with a very direct and very simple message for Western audiences. Arm Ukraine. Tell me, it's my sense that the Russian military failures are very well publicized. They're almost hard to miss. The Ukrainian military successes are for obvious reasons not as obvious until you see Russia retreat and reposition and redefine success. If you well, but just give me your assessment. People on the front lines, how is the military holding up? Well, the military is doing great, I think. They've proved everyone wrong, and I keep calling them our head negotiator. So I have some news. I think this hasn't been made public just yet. If you remember that proverbial Russian warship, it was the actual warship Moskva, amply named, of that threatened Ukrainian border guards, and who told them they told that Russian ship to go away using slightly different language. Well, that ship is on fire now after encountering two what seemed to be Ukrainian missiles. Oh wow, that fire right now. We're doing okay. Yeah, help me understand how the civilian population changed in terms of its ability to withstand the world learning about the atrocities in Bucha and Mariupol. Well, look, I would describe what's being portrayed by the Western media as snapshots of the war. So basically everyone knows what's going on from those separate pictures, but what people don't realize that this unfortunate rabbit hole goes way deeper. That there are a number of crimes that haven't been publicized yet, and only today I was kind of thinking that I can't name a single crime or war crime that hasn't been committed by the Russian army. It is simply horrific. The latest cases, for example, of child rape that we're finding out about are out of this world in terms of his brutality, and just pure horrors of this war. So the civilian population has been there throughout this whole ordeal. And I'm actually, if you notice, my background is different, and let me kind of calm everyone down, because I remember I said that my background is different. It means that Kiev has been encircled. Kiev is absolutely safe. I'm away from Kiev for a week, so you're going to see Groggy back in about a week's time. But look, what's even more important now is to focus on other areas of this war. So for example, Ukrainian economy is struggling, so I have a message for the Western businesses. For example, you have probably the biggest brand in the world now, Ukraine. Why not partner up with Ukrainian small and medium-sized businesses to make extra revenue and to help Ukraine that way whilst helping yourself? Why don't fashion outlets partner up with Ukrainian designers and sell Ukrainian collections? The whole world is kind of paying attention to Ukraine, so that will help. As I said to you before, we need our Pope Geldof. We need the new Live 8. And in the hope that you might be that Sir Bob Geldof and help us kind of get that process moving as well. For any entrepreneur in the world, what's happening in Ukraine is now actually the biggest dream project, because you have to rebuild everything from scratch. So you can anything goes, any business projects or anything. So literally the world has helped us with the tension and weapons whilst we're fighting the other battles of this world. We need to start thinking about what we're gonna do next, because if our economy collapses, if our businesses go bankrupt, it was all for nothing. Ukraine will be just the territory that we've defended, but we'll be starving, and we need to prevent that, and that's why I'm on this trip. No, that's amazing. It's almost like the focus of the West was on the sanctions for Russia's economy. Unfortunately, both sides in a war have their economy decimated, and so your case is for almost the anti-sanction on the other side. And if you look on social media, everyone has adopted blue and yellow. There has to be an opportunity like you're talking about for brands and profession. That's a great idea. I hope someone is watching that could do something about that. I want to ask you something more personal. How are your girls doing? Well, the girls are doing well, but it's quite an experience. We're in Europe now for the coming days before going back, and on the way here we actually drove through those regions that were affected in the Kiev region, so we saw everything with our own eyes. And just to give you an idea of how traumatizing an experience of war is, two quick stories. First of all, Masha went to a forest today in a European country, and Masha is 2.5, so she's still a toddler. She's speaking, but she doesn't grasp complicated concepts. So we took her to the forest, and she said but you told us that you told me there were landmines. How are we going into the forest? And the reason for that is because we've been told as Ukrainians we can't go to forest because there are landmines there. My story is different though, because on the way here we stopped in the European country and I went out for some fresh air before going to sleep, and I heard the passenger jet fly over, and look, I've spent 44 days in complete silence where the sound of a jet engine meant there was a cruise missile or a fighter jet flying over your house. So I literally ducked under the bench when I heard the passenger jet, and that kind of dawned on me that how much damage we need to repair it is, even psychologically, to people. And I've lost people, but I'm considered the lucky one. My house is still standing. I haven't lost immediate family members, so that's important. A funny story, because I can't let you go without one. Yeah, the the trending story today is the fact that everyone in Ukraine within innovation community is discussing the fact that Russian founders of startups have begun changing their names to sound more Western. So Pelter below becomes Patrick Bell, and he told another few of my colleagues in the presidential office that I have a Russian surname, so I'm an Igor Novikov. Igor, if I had to change my name I would change to Gary, but Novikov means new guys, so in fact I'm Gary Newman. So that was probably the first time of the last week when I felt myself lucky that I'm not rushing. I don't have to become a Gary Newman somewhere though. Igor Gary Newman, if he's my viewer, is watching and he's so bummed by this conversation, we'll have to introduce you guys someday to make it up to him. I've been asking you to stick around because last time you were here you mentioned that you have this expertise and specialty and keen interest in talking about Russian disinformation. One thing that's very clear is that some of the I don't even want it. I want to be careful on how I use this, but some of what seems to embolden Vladimir Putin's heinous war crimes, the genocide that's taking place, is that within his own country the truth either doesn't get through or they don't believe it. They have such, and it's hard to relate to I think outside of Russia, but they have such a brick after brick after brick after brick of propaganda that they can see those horrors and not see them the way we do. And we know over the last several weeks that Putin has squashed opposition to the invasion politically within his country with alarming success, cracking down on any publication or any voices that are against the war, that are telling the truth about what is actually happening, about the war crimes, about the genocide the Russia is carrying out inside Ukraine. Part of those efforts include spreading lies and disinformation around the country, around the world, to garner more support and bolster it where it falters, like this new fake video which shows just how far the Russian propaganda machine will go. Next up, Belarusian media outlet points out a fake video blaming Ukraine for the attack on civilians at the train station that has BBC-style credits and texts laid over it. There's no such video that BBC created. There's no such video that exists on the official BBC site. The Daily Beast adds this, reporting the text itself, riddled with style errors and awkward wording, appears to have been pulled straight from pro-Kremlin Telegram channels, pushing the narrative that the missile used in the attack actually belonged to Ukraine. Several Russian news outlets began spreading the video is authentic. BBC reporting on Wednesday, claiming Western media had confirmed the Kremlin's version of events. Joining this part of our conversation, Clint Watts, former consultant to the FBI's counterterrorism division, now a distinguished research fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute and an MSNBC national security analyst. So Clint I was admonished by a former senior intelligence official who suggested that I didn't totally get the drift of Russian propaganda, that even repeating the fact that he has lots of support within the country is part of the success of that propaganda. We don't know that for sure, it just appears to be the case, but that it is so sophisticated that it actually relies on Western media to bolster the Russian lies. Talk about how prevalent this is inside Russia. Clinton Nicole, if I rebound to 2015 and 2016, I could show you Russia Today RT articles on their websites, and it would point to Twitter accounts of alleged Americans known as netizens, anonymous individuals that were supporting essentially the Russian position. Now we learned after 2016 those were Internet Research Agency troll farm tweets, oftentimes that they were pushing out the content, making it look like an America was agreeing with the Russian position, then recycling that into Russian state media. This is the same technique they're pulling now, but what's ironic about all of it is this is designed for Russian audiences. They're trying to convince Russian audiences the Ukrainians did something, and because they know Russian audiences don't really believe Russian information, they tried to make a BBC a Western media outlet. They literally made a fake of that so they could justify to their own population that this happened, because they know, I think domestically they know, that at least half the country doesn't believe everything that's pushed out on Russian propaganda. So what's remarkable about all of this is while we have these Incremental advances where we get worked up about something that Russia is doing for propaganda and disinformation. We did very well in the lead up to the war. The Russian machine of disinformation continues on every single day, and they're communicating to audiences worldwide while we have successes in the English language and particularly with Ukraine and the battle in Ukraine inside Russia. It's a non-stop